Hey, good morning, everybody. Vince Devall with Eagle Homes. Welcome to our Monday morning podcast. I got Brad Brewer on the other side in a nice little vest and a flannel shirt. And then Adam Zeman. Man, if I knew it was vest day, Adam Zeman with A to Z Mortgage. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here again this morning. I love doing this on Mondays. Great way to start the week in my eyes. So
it's always best day in my world, Vince. You know this.
That is true. So one quick thing, we won't be here for the next 2 weeks. Want everyone to be able to enjoy the holiday, spend time with the family that might be in town or traveling. So we won't be back until January 9th, which is that Monday, a week after the New Year. So just wanted to let those know that watch. But today we're going to talk about, wanted to kind of touch on some of the expenses it costs for our buyers and sellers from the homeownership side and selling side, more to prepare them for 2023. If home buying or home selling is in their mind for 2023, kind of want to set them up to know what to expect, and where some of those costs come in and what, to prepare for this up and coming year. So I think it's a great way to tie up the end of last year and then kind of talk about, what they need to do for 2023. So, who wants to go first, Adam or Brad?
I can go first. So you want to just basically just go over the complete cost of like a mortgage?
Yep. Okay. Complete cost of the mortgage from the lending side. And I don't know if we could break it down between a buyer side and then a seller side, separate them out. So if somebody's watching it, they know that these costs are buyer sides or these costs are seller sides or whatever you think's best to do it. I don't know. You see them all the time.
Yeah, I do. And I basically just see the buyer side. Sometimes I'll go over basically like a closing disclosure at the end. So,
okay.
What that's going to look like is going to be, you have different classes of fees. You have, can fees or fees that like always stay the same. And then you have fees that change depending on the buyer. Okay. So the fees that basically always stay the same are going to be, like a processing fee and an underwriting fee, an appraisal fee. Those are things that are, those stay throughout, no matter who purchases a home, that's going to be the same fees. Okay. Now where it gets different is prepaids, which are taxes and insurance. So you don't really know what that's going to look like because everybody's tax bill is a little bit different. So when you close on a mortgage, typically most people escrow for taxes and insurance. And if people don't know what that means that at the end of the year, your lender is going to pay your taxes. And then when your insurance is due, they're going to pay your insurance. For instance, mine literally has already been paid. I already got my bill and like within a day, it was already paid. So I'm good. So you collect 3 months worth of taxes and insurance in an escrow account in case your taxes go up. You have a little bit of a buffer so you don't have to worry about coming to at the end of the year coming to pay some money for your taxes or adjusting your escrow. When you also typically the way homeowners insurance works is you have to pay for a full year worth of homeowners insurance prior to closing on your home. And then next year we're gonna pay it, and the following year you're always like a year ahead. So you can see how some of these numbers they're not the same for everybody because everybody's a little different depending on how much you're getting charged for homeowners insurance, depending on how much you're paying for your taxes. And then nowadays, basically as soon as looking back when the Fed started to hike interest rates 75 basis points every other day, it made it so that rates typically, we're looking at something like quarter or half a point to charge on a lot of these people's interest rates. And that's just the volatility of it. As soon as that calms down, which it really is, as soon as it kind of levels off, that will go away. That's basically what everybody is doing right now. So not everybody has the same fees because there's a lot of different variables there. But long story short, you're going to pay for, like an underwriting fee for me. I have some leeway on the processing fee. and you're going to be paying for, you have to do an appraisal to purchase a home. What happens typically on that final closing disclosure is whatever day you close. So I have a closing today. Today's the 19th. The seller is responsible for paying the property taxes from the 1st to the 19th. And now the buyer is responsible for paying property taxes from the 19th to the close. So we're going to collect a full year's worth of taxes. And then the seller is going to give what's called a tax proration to cover their portion from the 1st until the 19th. So that's where the final closing disclosure gets not confusing, but that's when all those numbers are reconciled between the seller and the buyer. And that typically doesn't come until usually about 48 hours before before closing. It just depends on the situation. So I tell people like the lender numbers don't really change, but when you're looking at your final closing disclosure, I would say 90% of the time it comes in lower than what I said because of those credits you're going to get from the seller. So you're the same again. There's portions of the fees that are the same for everybody, and then there's prepaids that are different for depending on your situation. So there's not one size fits all. I know a lot of people like to call and ask about that. What am I paying? And it changes. And my response is always you can always structure a deal so the sellers are paying for some or if not all of your closing costs. And that's very popular nowadays just because of the way the market is.
So Adam, real quick, when you talk about underwriting, appraisal fee, processing fee, those what I think you called canned fees, right? Is that what you called them?
Yeah.
Can you give us a range? What's a range? Are we talking, appraisal fee between 300 and 500, or for an average, let's say an average size home, 2,000 square feet? Does it vary based on the size of the home too?
And I'm sorry, Vince, I forgot about title insurance too. That's in there. That's about six to $700. So for those fees all in, you're looking, depending on the person, you're looking between $1,200 and like $1,800.
Okay.
I would say it really depends on the lender. I think probably on the high end you're looking at probably $1,800, on the low end you're looking at maybe $1,100. Just title insurance is pretty much about $700, and then appraisal is going to be about $500. So that's $1,100 right there.
Yep.
Add on, doing an underwriting fee or a processing fee, depending on, where you're lending. That's going to be that's going to add money. And
right.
Those fees could be like negotiated. What can't be negotiated is the title fee and the appraisal fee. A lot of times that underwriting or processing fee is something that, can be negotiated.
Gotcha. It's kind of like when you buy a car and they add on the dock fee for, having the car on their property. I'm like, really?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, no, good. Brad, any questions that you could think of for Mr. A to Z?
No.
Oh, he's got his own little jingle.
A to Z.
No, he actually has a pretty thorough explanation of the costs. I guess a couple things are anything like variable wise that just little one-offs that can pop up that we didn't discuss or didn't bring up. You hit the standard ones pretty, as far as I can tell. Pretty good. It's just any ones that are kind of unique to certain situations that you can think of.
Sewer, sometimes special assessments.
Okay.
Those are one-offs. Everybody takes that, they pay sewer and water, maybe sometimes a little different, or garbage collection. My garbage collection is on my taxes, but I've seen it differently. Special assessments, you might get in a situation. I'm sure they've talked to you, the realtor, about like purchasing a home, and there might already be a special assessment for, they put in whatever sewer, or they put in, walkways or whatever that might look like. Those are probably one-offs that I've seen happen, and sometimes I've seen it where people didn't necessarily know about them for whatever reason. I focus on like the lending numbers because that's a full-time job just thinking about that. I never know those other figures until I see that final closing disclosure, in which case I'm seeing it for the first time that this, the buyer would be seeing it. Hopefully, again, that's something that's been talked about in the process of purchasing a home, about some of those other figures. HOA fees, but that's something I would know about.
Right.
If you're by water, sometimes
Mhm.
they're basically an HOA fee, but maybe it's like a slip fee where you might have to have a private little beach or slip, or sometimes people have like pools too, like HOA pools. I don't know. Those are the very one-offs that they're just not common. The only thing you might see is if
Yeah.
you're by water in Wisconsin, because we have so many lakes.
What about,
Yeah,
so
that-
what, sorry,
Go
talking
ahead.
about water, what about flood insurance? Is that typically paid for by the buyer, kind of like their homeowner's insurance?
So flood insurance is kind of on top of homeowners insurance. Is really expensive. Anytime I purchase a home in this state, I can't speak for other states. We do a flood cert. If you're in a flood zone, you have to get flood insurance to cover for the mortgage policy. And I mean, I've seen that $2,000-3,000 a year. I mean, that can change your payment a lot. That can get really pricey. That is, that's, people are like, should I buy this house at that point? Like that changes the game. That's for sure.
Right. And like you said, it's required, right? Like
It is required if you're in a flood zone.
Yep. No. Good point. Sorry, Brad. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just had that thought. So what was your question?
No, that's a good point, because I'll kind of be talking about obviously both buyer and seller side from the real estate side, but special assessments is one of those things that I'm glad you brought it up, because I'll mention some things that agents should look for their client to understand that. So excellent answer. Yeah, there's definitely some little one-offs there those are great examples. That's all I had.
All right, good. Well, let's go into the buying and selling side from the agent aspect, working with the client
Okay.
and some of those costs.
Sounds good. So we'll start with the buyer side. The ones that we talk most about are really buyer stuff, and Adam will mention some of these as far as part of what he talked about. But so let's just start with earnest money. As soon as you get the accepted offer, there's usually some type of earnest money you're offering. It varies. It can be 1% to 3% typically. Wisconsin, I see a lot with, if there's just loans involved, $1,000, $2,000, depending on the type of loan. So that's just going to be something you're going to want to discuss with your realtor, of what earnest money you're putting down and why. And then also, there are situations with certain types of loans where you basically get your earnest money back in a way, or it gets factored into your closing for like VA loans, USDA loans. I've seen people actually get checks back at closing for that kind of stuff. But that is your really first expense. That's earnest money. For those that don't know, it's simply, that's the money you put down that's held typically by the listing firm, and it just goes as a credit towards the purchase. So if you're paying $200,000, you put $1,000 down, you got $199 already left to go without any other credits or charges. So, and then immediately after that, we're going to start scheduling home inspection. Most homes, we're talking homes under 3,500 square feet, probably even under 4,000. Depends on the inspector. You're looking around the $300 to $400 for the base home inspection. And then if you're going to do radon inspections and home inspections are typically a buyer expense, probably more than 99% of the time. I'm not sure I've actually ever had a radon inspection or a home inspection paid for by a seller in my career. It's possible, but very rare case. So, and radon inspections usually add another about 100 to 150. Again, depending on the inspector, depending on their rates. They do factor drive time. So if you got a trusty appraiser, but they've got to drive from Burlington maybe over to east side of Kenosha, there can be some trip charges there. So I would factor with total inspections somewhere around $400 to $500. Your down payment, I'll breeze over this. That's varied by the loan. Adam went over down payment. Yeah, that's typically loan type, conventional 3, 5, 10, 20 plus, right? Depends if you use proceeds from a previous sale. Those are all things that when we sit down as an agent and we understand your financials as far as your pre-approval, or if you're paying cash, we do typically go over, here's what you're probably going to be bringing to closing. We do estimates on that, and we'll talk on the seller side here shortly. And then home warranty, I could probably put this, if we were talking 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, it was very commonly a buyer expense, or excuse me, a seller expense. Those were written into the offers that the seller pay the home warranty. It kind of flipped the last several years when it was an extreme seller's market, low inventory, because buyers didn't want to ask for things, but they wanted the value of that home warranty. It was just easier to pay for. And a home warranty is going to run you $450 to, they can be over $600. Depends. I mean, you get basically a home warranty, for those that don't know, covers typically mechanicals and appliances are the big things. There are, in certain coverages, smaller aggregate amounts for roof, plumbing, or electrical. You can add coverage if you have a pool, so your pool equipment. Those are things that you can add to the home warranty. Those get those home warranties up definitely higher towards the 600 plus range. I think the most expensive home warranty that covered pool equipment, all that, was around $800 for the year. So it's similar to insurance. It's just really, it's what it's doing is it's insuring more of your mechanicals and equipment and appliances, which is nice because I don't know why. And I started telling buyers this. It seems like something always breaks within a couple weeks of getting in that new home. I don't care if it's a brand new home or whatever. I mean, dishwashers. I had one guy call me last year. He bought his home close to Christmas. Just wanted to make a pizza. Oven doesn't work. So it's really nice that those home warranties come into play. So if your seller does not pay for them, or you can't get it written in the offer that the seller pays, it's definitely an investment that we'll talk to you about. And it's one of those things that I think they're worth the money, at least for the first year, just based on luck. And Vince, isn't that one of our promos right now for January through March? You're on mute.
Yeah, home warranty or helping with some moving expense, paying for a moving truck. So yeah, January through March. Good point.
So
Fred,
check that out. You got questions on that, but basically Vince and I with Eagle Homes are offering either a home warranty. We got caps on these, so you can't get the Cadillac version of the home warranty, and we'll cover a 1 days of a moving truck if you close with us as your agents, January through March for 2023. So good discount to kick off the year.
Hey, Brad, quick question. When we talk about inspections and we mentioned VA, and I'm not positive on this, is where we are currently living, Wisconsin, Southeast Wisconsin, is a termite inspection required for a VA loan?
Yes, it is.
Yep. Who pays for
that? Buyer typically pays for it.
Okay.
Again, unless it's something you negotiated. I've seen it flipped. Again, those technically on the form, on our offer forms that we have that the state attorneys prepare for us, they are a buyer by default. You can, any of this stuff really, you could technically select or change it to seller, but these are common ones in the termite inspection and pest inspection is common. I just had one done for a client there. It was $150. So again, about $150. So, you're probably talking between inspections. Oh, your appraisal, I know I had to touch on appraisal, but appraisal is usually $500. That's something that's usually paid for before closing in a lot of instances. So you're talking $1,000, $1,500 just on some of these inspections and tests and things, not including your down payment. So that covers a lot of what's on the buyer side. As far as seller side, I'm gonna start with well and septic. It was actually in the offers, it was the state had it defaulted to the seller for years. And I think it was early last year, I can't remember the exact timeline. They changed it to the buyer. And I don't know if they changed it because buyers were starting to pay for them more anyway because of the state of the market and the competition. But that has historically been the well and septic's typically been a seller expense. I still write them as seller expense, and I think you're going to start getting those again to the seller. Again, that's one of those things that can definitely sway a little bit. But
why, Brad? Why would it be a seller expense and not a buyer expense like the home inspection?
Well, one of the main reasons I think it should be a seller expense is so, again, if you have to have a well and septic inspection at the time of when you sell your home, when the inspection's done, let's say your current deal falls out, those are only good for 60 days typically for most lenders. I've seen a few lenders, and they have the say in this, extend them out further, but typically you can use the same inspection for 60 days. But if it takes you longer than that to get a new accepted offer from another, you're paying for it again. So they've typically been seller because they do stay with the home.
Gotcha.
There's a
Makes
short
sense.
period of time, but they do stay with the home, and the seller can reuse them because whoever pays for whatever, they own it. When
Right.
as a buyer, you pay for a home inspection, you own it. So which kind of come in handy because let's say you end your deal. Just because the seller's agent may have that inspection, they're not technically supposed to release that. You as the buyer can give permission to, but you own that. That's your inspection. Now, if there are defects notified, because the law is that sellers and sellers agents, if they're aware of safety defects, they do have to disclose those. That's just an update to the condition report. They still don't have to provide the information or the actual inspection. So that's basically why on the wild septic though. You own it. So it's a good thing to have. Now, typically a lot of these inspections, when you write the offer, they're due within a certain number of days after accepted offer. We do typically write the well and septic a certain number of days, it's usually 10 prior to closing. That's good because it allows the seller to make sure that a lot of contingencies have been cleared so that we're not ordering the well and septics before the inspection's even done, because that's usually what can kill or terminate most deals. So you don't want to have a well and septic inspection and all of a sudden your deal gets terminated from the home inspection. So timing is important as well. Other than that, seller pays commission. Again, one of those 95 to 99% of the times, seller pays all the commissions. That's to your listing agent, agency, and the co-brokers, we call them, which is the seller or the buyer's agent or buyer's agency. It's who the commissions are paid to. And then now you get some other ones that are a little bit mixed. So, and actually, before I say that, title expenses are usually, the buyer can have more title expenses, but the bulk of the title policy is typically on the seller. The buyer policy is less expensive, but you're going to have, I always calculate, and this is usually high, 1% of your sales value would be your closing costs, like transfer tax fees, title policy, closing docs, preparation, basically all your title company fees, the fees the title company is going to prepare. And I don't know if it's a seller expense or not, but you'll have your taxes prorated as well. So you are responsible from the first of the year to the prorate of the day you close. So, which gets a little tricky with title companies this time of year because tax bills have gone out, and a lot of times sellers have paid them through escrow accounts or whatever. So there's usually a little bit of a couple extra questions the title company will ask, and figuring out where the money is at for taxes this time of year. But I always calculate 1%. That tends to be a little bit high, but it's usually a good estimate. So again, $1,000 essentially if you're a $200,000 home, but that can also be low. It really does depend. So, that'd be $2,000, which 1% of 200,000. Sorry, my bad math there for a second. So
I was going to correct you.
Yeah, thanks. And then finally, there are a couple things both sides. Most commonly, buyer side is utilities, personal services, stuff like that. I've seen stuff like that negotiated on the seller side. And then moving expenses, I've seen that, or with our promo, your agent. So
what about, hey, Brad, is there ever a time that the buyer will be paying a commission?
So I'm going to speak to the rule of the law on this. Technically, a buyer agency agreement, which all buyers sign, you as the buyer are responsible for the commission. But right in the buyer agency, it says that your agency may collect from the seller or seller's agent, which that's why when homes are listed, the listing agents tell us what they're offering for what is called a co-broker, what they're offering. In this area, about 2.4% is the norm. Where you can have it where a buyer could have to pay is that if the listing agency for some reason only offers 2%, that 0.4%, technically you are on the hook for that unless your agent decides to get the listing agent to pay them the 2.4, or if your agent says, don't worry about it, we'll forego that and we'll just take the 2%, which is probably what happens most of the time. Is either the listing agency is willing to pay because it is the norm in the area, or the agent usually just says, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller or buyer will just forego that. So, but those aren't things. Otherwise, I do want to get to Adam's special assessment was really important, because when we get the title work and there's special assessments left over, you need to be careful, because it doesn't mean that the seller has to be careful, because sometimes, like, if there's a special assessment that's left over, even it's on a annual payment for X number more years, it could be called due and taken 100% of the balance from the seller. So you do have to watch that and make sure, like, a common one years ago was, I think it's done now, Boners Lake, when they put in the municipal sewer out there, that would just usually transfer. So whatever the annual payment was on your taxes just stayed to the buyer that bought the home. It was not called due. But you have to be careful, because some can be, depends on the language of the special assessment, that either seller or buyer, when there's an exchange of real estate, has to pay the full balance due. So you gotta be careful of that. So it's something as an agent we have to look at.
Wonderful. Any questions for Brad that you could think of that, something you might have missed or touched on that you weren't sure about?
Why do some agents charge a buyer agency agreement fee where others don't? Why so, and why would I ever go with an agent that charges that fee versus someone that doesn't?
You mean like a additional fee?
Yeah, like sometimes it's like a $500 buyer's agency fee that's on top of the commission.
It's a great question. It's hard to answer for everybody, Adam. I will say that there are a lot of additional costs that are taken on by your agents, and you're licensed under the house of your brokerage. So your brokerage is going to take a percentage. Whether it's a listing agent or a buyer's agent, you're not getting that full commission. And we have expenses that, even though we may give X percentage to the brokerage of that full commission, that doesn't cover all our expenses. So it just really takes down our profits. And like any business, we have to have a profit, because it's how we continue to operate our business. It's how we feed our families. So just like your plumber, they've got to have margins. I'm not looking to a plumber to come in and do a bunch of work in my house and break even. They need to make money. So sometimes if the fees that we're soaking up aren't covered very well and minimize our profits to even no profit, sometimes you have to charge that. Also, because of the services you're offering. There's some services that sometimes we offer as agents that no other agents offer, and we've got to, again, offset that cost somehow. So hey, if you want these additional services that ensure that the compliance of your deal is really managed well, sometimes it's worth that extra money. I'll give you my opinion. You said 500. I've seen it vary. So, but transaction coordinators is a big one. Like, teams should have transaction managers to coordinate getting their deals. They're kind of like loan processors on your side. Your processors, are what? They're in charge of making sure that deals get done. They're done right, on time, and in compliance, right? We have those resources too, and brokerages don't pay for that a lot of times. We pay for it. So a lot of times it's to recoup that fee.
I think that's I think that's great. That's kind of my opinion. I think that if you're working with someone that has a team, you're going to get way better service a lot of times because you have someone that dedicated towards just being a transaction manager. Because there can be a lot. If you're working 10 files a month, that can be a lot to do. So I think that fee is definitely warranted. I've seen it where people are like one-man shows and they're, this is from my side of things. They're nothing special, and it just seems like they just want more money,
No, I think as an agent, we're responsible for justifying it now because it is true. Like I've seen it. I mean, $10,000 gross commission checks. The full check's 10,000, but between the brokerages, expenses, taxes, the government gets their share. And we got a lot of time and effort. And from 10,000 down to sometimes 3,000. That's like it's like and it's like any other business. It's like is that plumbers, electricians? There's overhead, right? And just like the rest of the world's experience inflation, so do we. So I do understand it. I think you should be able to, and I can tell you if we charge any type of additional fee, we're explaining it, we're justifying it, and we're explaining why. And at the end of the day, I'm not a rich man, I just want to provide for my family, make a good living, save for retirement, right? Do I want to make a good amount of money? Of course I do. Like anybody that goes into business, anybody goes into business for yourself, it's a risk reward, right? So that's the reason. I hope that explains it pretty well.
It did. I wanted to throw a couple of things in. There's been some changes into that termite thing for VA. So might want to look into that if you have a deal going for that. I think there was a point where only the buyer could pay for it. I think that's changed since recently. Also a pro tip. When you're writing earnest money, if you write it less than 1%, especially for government deals, it makes the deal a little easier on the lending side because we don't have to source anything with less than 1% of the purchase price. That's a little tip for you guys. It makes it a little easier for the processing and underwriting of a file.
Hey,
Good point.
I love learning new stuff. I had never heard a lender tell me that before. If they had, I forgot.
A lot of them don't even know or think about it, or they can't wrap their head around it, or that's another story.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Adam. That's a good tip.
Yeah, so guys, let's wrap up here. Thanks again. It's been a hectic 2022. We're going to reconvene in 2023, and we'll hit the ground running. So thank you for your time today. Appreciate everything you guys do for our clients and everyone else. So thank you. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Have a nice
Happy New
Christmas,
Year.
everybody.
Bye.